I've created a turnkey end-to-end manufacturing platform that we meet brands and retailers and consumers where they are and help them on this journey by unlocking sustainability in an easy and affordable way.
You're listening to Retail Remix, your inside access to candid conversations with the people shaping retail's future. Here's your host, Alicia Esposito.
Marci Zaroff is an incredible leader and change maker in the world of sustainability. And more specifically, sustainability in fashion, home, textile, food, so much more. That's why I was so thrilled to sit down with her and not just dig into her career, how she started, the progress that she's seen in the retail world, but also how she has seen conversations and decisions take shape at the business level. Because I know we at Retail Touchpoints have been covering so many different studies, so many different successes and lessons along the way. So I really wanted to make sure that we got her perspective because she has a seat at some incredible tables and has played a role in some very critical conversations in this world of sustainability. Listen in because you'll hear all of the incredible projects she has done, from working on her book to helping shape some new merch collections for Universal Music Group. Listen in because not only is her experience inspiring and insightful, but she also shares some incredible examples and some incredible takeaways that no matter where you are in your sustainability journey, you can take them and you can apply them. Marci, welcome to Retail Remix. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you are undoubtedly an eco lifestyle pioneer. It's honestly why I'm so excited to have you on and chat with you today. You actually coined the term ECOfashion in 1995 to kind of set your stake in the ground. I'm curious, what did ECOfashion mean to you back then, and how has it evolved, if at all?
So back then, when I said the word eco-fashion for the first time, which is really the fusion of ecology and fashion, two worlds that I was actually living in, I joke that my big fashion background was I got best dressed in high school. So I always loved fashion. But my career came out of the organic, natural food industry and the environmental movement. And that's really where I got my feet wet on understanding the impacts of agriculture and human health. And so when I sort of woke up to the interconnection of food and fiber, which is really led by cotton, where I learned that 60% of a cotton plant goes back into the food industry, I had this like aha moment. And so when I put those words together and said, I'm going to, transform the fashion industry and leverage the power of fashion to expand sustainable agriculture and to support our ecosystems, biodiversity and resilience, people thought I was crazy. So back then, the stigmas, of course, were crunchy, frumpy, boxy, beige, boring, potato sack, and overpriced, and how do you really know, and all these stigmas and pushbacks and resistance. And, I definitely have the bruises to prove that it's been a long and winding road to get to this moment in time. But, when you talk about its evolution, I would say it's no longer a choice. It's an imperative. It's not about staying ahead anymore. It's about not being left behind, that if you're not integrating social and environmental accountability into your supply chains, into your products, your brands, and your companies, you're going to be out of the game.
Great points. And I'm so glad you brought up the visuals that came to mind back then, because I really do think there has been such an incredible evolution. So fast forward a couple of decades, and you released your book, Eco Renaissance, in 2018 to provide and I quote, lifestyle guide for co-creating a stylish, sexy, and sustainable world. So again, quite a pivot to those previous assumptions about what it meant to be, sustainable. Again, this was in 2018. So conversations surrounding sustainability seem to really accelerate, at least in terms of, our coverage, how we were tracking the industry. And we started to really see movement from the consumer's perspective. What were your your intentions with writing and releasing this book? Was it more of a call to action for consumers, a call to action for business leaders, or maybe a hybrid of the two?
Absolutely. Well, we're all in this together, right? We're all a global ecosystem. And I think if COVID taught us anything, that's the big awakening that we're all connected, right? I mean, everybody around the world, nobody could have ever foreseen we'd all be sitting at home. But the benefit of that was home being we had the ability to go inside, but not outside. And so I think the idea of a renaissance is a rebirth. It's this idea that we're all a part of an ecosystem, an eco renaissance. Really, the premise of the book is through the lens of design, we can change the world, right? If we appeal to people at a visceral level or in an aesthetic way through their basic senses, through sight, through touch, through taste, through scent, then you can take them down that proverbial rabbit hole of the why and the how and the what and the where and the when, right? But design is so powerful. And the founder of Aveda, Horst Rechelbacher, wrote the foreword to my book because he really was such an inspiration to me, such an icon and a mentor, of 25 years. And he really was brilliant in the way that he brought beauty to life through Aveda, teaching people that beauty really comes from within, but never compromising that visual. And so when you think about, when I talk about my book and sort of how it came to life, it starts with art because we are all creators, right? We've created everything that we see around us. It's the power of our existence. And as Einstein once said, we can't solve today's problems with the same consciousness that created them. So the sort of 5 C's of my book, just to kind of summarize, are creativity, consciousness, connection, collaboration, and community. And these are really the principles of this renaissance, this rebirth of humanity, where we're understanding we have these tools to redesign or recreate or co-create a new reality, one that serves us versus destroys, depletes, and pollutes us. And so when we talk about whether it's talking to consumers or it's talking to business leaders, ultimately it's both because we are all in this together.
I love that. I think appealing to the shared experience, the humanity and community of it, I mean, that's one of your C's, right? I think that is the most compelling. And I feel like that's something that has been fully realized from the consumer standpoint. I mean, just even us as individuals, right? And just knowing that it does really need to be a collective versus, we're all kind of in our own little vacuums or silos, and it's just about me, right? And it's determining how can we work together, but also how can we encourage others, whether it be individuals or business entities, to kind of rise to the occasion. I'm curious, just to dig a little bit deeper into your process writing the book. I always love to ask authors this. Was there an evolution or a journey for you in the creative process? Like, I always find like there's an initial objective or motivation, but then sometimes the creative process, at least for me, I mean, kind of end up going on a bit of a journey. You make some new turns, you go down a different path. Did that happen at all? Were there any new things that kind of came up during that creative process that really helped elevate the book to what it is?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would just say as a very personal journey for me, in that I started my career, as I mentioned, really as a kind of a designer artist. Just on a personal level, I grew up doing calligraphy and painting and pottery, and I always loved the arts and kind of that drawing inspiration, especially from nature. And then that evolved where my first business was in food. I co-founded a school known as the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, which is today the world's largest holistic health nutrition school and has certified almost 200,000 people worldwide as health coaches. So that sort of took me down that sort of rabbit hole of understanding the impacts of the food we eat and the source of our foods and what's in them and, how is it made? And in meeting Horst from Aveda and hearing that his vision and his work was so parallel to mine, but using beauty products as that modality for igniting change and planting that seed of consciousness, right? And so suddenly that lifestyle evolution was very eye-opening to me, like, oh, right, just like nature, when you plant a seed and you cultivate it, it keeps growing. And that took me into this like aha about, you can't support one part of the equation without the other. And that took me into fashion. So in writing the book, I connect the dots of art, food, wellness, beauty, fashion, and business, what I call all the spokes in the wheel of change, to help people understand that this is a holistic mindset. This is one that you can't stop, right? Once you embrace this kind of thinking about everything we put in, on, and around our bodies, because we're just made of energy and everything we choose is as well. And I'll just end with saying, collaboration is such a huge unlock, whether it's, B2B or it's B2C or it's being in your local, regional, global community, because 1 + 1 = 11. And think of that as, we're exponentially stronger together than apart when we hold hands and we drive change together.
I love that. That connectivity is powerful when you really, really break down all of the layers to it. Well, it's been 6 years since the book was released, and I feel like there has been so much progress and change within this world of sustainability. Again, largely looking at it through a retail lens. But to your point, there are all so many different offshoots and connecting points in this larger conversation. So I'm curious, how have you seen the world of sustainability and just general eco-awareness evolve? I mean, like, what have been some of the big milestones or achievements? If we were to really break it down, maybe let's start at the retail level specifically, and then we can kind of go out more broadly. I'm curious, like, what do you found to be really big moments or achievements as if we were to look at the larger sustainability mission?
Yeah, well, if you want to focus on retail, I would say when I look back on 2005 and 6, when I was first working with, let's say, Target as an example, most of the sustainability initiatives were being driven from within the marketing departments, right? It was about storytelling. It was tell a good story by doing less bad about something we're doing, what even as simple as let's change the light bulbs in our offices, right? There was a lot of very kind of blurry lines around defining sustainability. And I think the more it's evolved, the more it's become not just about less bad, but about more good. And the only way to actually turn that sort of concept into action is to start at the source, and sort of mirroring what I talked about with food, starting at the source, the farm to table movement. People have embraced that. They get it. In textiles, people are so far removed from the thought and idea of source, including the retailers and the brands, right? Because, consumers think their clothing is growing in the department store and their food is growing in the supermarket. And they're still sort of getting like, oh yeah, people's lives are being affected. Nature's being affected, our environment, every choice we make. So I think the same thing when you look at the retail level, the businesses were not set up to go to a cotton farm or go to a raw material and build up a supply chain. Historically, our industry, the model is you give an order to a factory and the factory gets what they need by sourcing down the supply chain. And that leaves brands and retailers very vulnerable to missteps and to potential greenwashing claims, and even going to the other extreme of green hushing, where no longer are these initiatives being driven by marketing departments. They're being driven by the product design and development teams, the sourcing teams that are working, with guidance from sustainability and marketing potentially, but they're really rolling their sleeves up and making sure that they're building supply chains, or they're building partnerships with those who are building their supply chains that can validate and verify every claim and all of the data and all of the steps along the supply chain, so that at the end of the day, when they put a product out, not only can they ensure that they are doing something good, but that they can talk about it in the right way. And I think that's been a big shift in our industry, is companies are making these, somewhat audacious science-based climate targets now, right? Because they're getting held to account by today's consumers, especially young consumers who've grown up with the internet, and they can pull the curtain back and they can ask the questions: who made my clothes? What's in them? How are they being made? And they want answers, and transparency has become front and center. So with transparency comes traceability, and you have to start now looking at that source and how do you validate it. And I think when you look at what's happened in China with the forced labor issues in Xinjiang, with cotton, a fifth of the world's cotton is being grown in that region using forced labor. And that created huge backlash around, wait a minute, we have to understand about these choices we're making, how they're affecting biodiversity or humans, how, circular models are now coming into play so that we can get out of that linear mindset. So there's a lot of shift happening. And every time we take 2 steps forward, we take a step back, because, we have to keep building this in a more, quote, sustainable way. But I will end with saying the big catalyst is coming, and it's the policy that's underway. And that is absolutely going to light a fire under everybody, right? So it's coming and it's coming strong. This isn't going away. It's only going to get bigger.
Yeah. So I think that's a good transition to your role with EcoFashion Corp. And what I find most interesting about this is that, this is a B2B to C ecosystem, right? Like there are so many different players. And, I think your point about the regulatory aspects, and especially in Europe, it seems like looking at the benchmarks, right? Like it seems like Europe is a bit further along there, but movement is happening. Can you share a little bit with our listeners now as far as like the work you're doing now with EcoFashion Corp and kind of how this model of B2B to C can make an impact and how I guess it can help drive that influence and that change, both at the business level as well as the consumer level?
Sure. Yeah. No, as a 30 plus year educator, innovator in the industry, I've been at sort of the ground floor of really pioneering the sustainable fashion movement. So Eco Fashion Corp is really as over 30 years in the making, where I've created a turnkey end-to-end manufacturing platform that we meet brands and retailers and consumers where they are and help them on this journey by unlocking sustainability in an easy and affordable way, right? So if we're working with brands and retailers, we'll say, what products do you want to make? What price points do you want to hit? What volumes are you looking at? What kind of scalability? What kind of business requirements? What are your CSR goals? And we'll actually build finished product for them, delivering it to them at their price, with their volumes, with the ability to scale, with all the oversight and compliance and logistical and production management embedded into our ecosystem. And we even have a tech stack that gives full traceability from farm or raw material up to finished product, or we say seed to shelf, with an interactive journey that can then translate all the way to the consumer level, where the consumer can understand every touch point of the supply chain, every ingredient in the product, the ESG metrics and data if they want it. And if they don't want it and they just want a great shirt or dress or bed sheet or towel or robe or whatever the product is, that's great too. So it's all about no compromise at EcoFashion Corp. We have companies we work with that are high-end, making apparel such as sweaters and denim. We have mass market brands and companies we work with, such as Universal Music Group, where we're doing merch, fleece and t-shirts and even boxers for Billie Eilish's upcoming tour that she's about to kick off. We just did her t-shirts for her new album launch.
Oh, it's amazing. And I do want to dig a little bit deeper into that Billie Eilish collab, because I just think it's such a great opportunity and great way to showcase how these growth shoots, so to speak, show up and really flourish in unlikely places. So can you share a little bit about how that whole Universal Music Group partnership came about and how you went about supporting the release of this merch? I mean, you don't have to go into like in-depth details, but I'm just curious about like the origins, because it's just like, again, one of those things that it's like on the surface, it seems surprising, almost like an unlikely pair. But like the deeper you think about it, it's like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. So can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, I love the synchronicity of it. My future son-in-law, I'll say, my daughter's boyfriend, he's in the music business. He's an artist in an up-and-coming band that actually is kicking off their newest tour at Radio City Music Hall in a couple of weeks. They've been just really getting out there, and he asked me to make their merch, and because he knows the work I do. And so in doing so, he got to know kind of my work more and was in a meeting with a high level executive at Universal Music Group, just, through their networking industry work, and mentioned, they were talking about sustainability, and I guess mentioned what I do when this executive was talking about the vision of UMG and sustainability and making science-based climate targets. And so he connected us, and that led working with their sourcing department and going through some costing exercises and sampling, and they saw the work we do, and it was like, whoa, we haven't been able to unlock moving into sustainable merch in a scalable and authentic way that can be validated and verified and shared with artists to kind of transform the kind of merch that we're doing today, which is obviously has huge environmental and social impacts, given that it's, most of it's made in China and it's made with materials that are polluting and toxic. So we started with a very small test, but then Billie Eilish won the Oscar and the Grammy, and a tiny test turned into a large launch, which launched in conjunction with her new album at Target, at Urban Outfitters, and at Hot Topic stores nationwide. And the product blew through. And I think it was a testament to, you can have amazing, sustainable, great quality product at a price if you work together as, and this goes back to the win-win, working directly with retailers and big companies and looking at scale. And that's what we did at ECOfashion Corp. And the program was so successful that now we are producing lots of new products, and for new artists, for new categories, fleece, boxers for the tour. So it's super exciting. But what it's really, I think, shown both Universal Music as well as EcoFashion is that the buying power of these companies, these artists, and then the influence that they have out in the public, where they want to be a part of something good. They want to, for whether it's brand image or it's true values that they have, they understand that the role that they play in terms of influencing their followers. And I think the younger generations definitely want this. They just don't know where to find it, that where they can, afford it. And I think so there's a lot of opportunity and potential here to not only drive massive change in the music industry, but have a huge impact, positive impact on human and planetary health by doing that, by leveraging that power. So I'm super excited about moving even deeper into the industry. I'm now on a kind of an advisory board that's a climate collective in the music industry, because this isn't just limited to Universal Music. All the music groups, Warner, Sony, I think everybody is realizing, just how much merch gets provided
Absolutely.
and bought in the industry. So the sheer buying power there is massive.
You raise a great point that there are so many artists out there that have these beliefs and they want to and do shop sustainably, or they invest very heavily in environmental causes and issues. But then you get to something that's so central to their product portfolio, so to speak, as an artist, which is merch, as you noted. And then it's like there's that disconnect there because there are standard processes or vendors, and it's kind of like that disconnect. So creating this connection and, having this incredible test case and seeing the resounding response from the consumer standpoint, I can only, my mind's kind of blown here thinking about the possibilities, because you're really giving them the access and that ability to not just showcase their fandom, but to do so in a way that aligns with their ethics and their values as consumers. That always seemed like the big disconnect, both from a quality perspective of the merch as well as, the actual sustainability of it all. So it's an incredible venture. I can't wait to see how it continues to take shape.
Thank you. Yeah. And again, it's, we want to give people the ability to see sustainable textiles, merch, fashion, home, whatever the category is, not about sacrifice or deprivation. They're not giving anything up, right? It's about getting more. It's about the look, feel, do good, and having the product that you want at the price you want. And, oh, by the way, also knowing that you're doing something good in the world, but all you're doing is really buying that same t-shirt you would have bought anyway. So everybody wins, right? So it's not why would you buy sustainable merch? It's why wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Reframing that conversation. You're obviously making an impact in the music and entertainment world. I'm curious, what are your priorities now in the world of retail and fashion? More specifically, how are you helping shape the conversations, helping inspire action through some of these proof points and incredible examples? Because again, there's so much movement happening, but then sometimes, every once in a while you see a blip of contrarian content or indications of brands, rethinking their approach. How are you ensuring that momentum continues in the world of retail and fashion specifically?
Yeah, so I wear a couple different hats. I would say one hat is I'm the chair of the board of an organization called the Textile Exchange, we had, a handful, maybe a couple hundred, 300 members max, before COVID. We now have almost 1,000 members across almost all the major retailers and brands worldwide. So we've made sort of a collective commitment to reducing our carbon footprint by 45% by 2030. And so I'm, as the chair of the board and a co-founder of the organization 23 years ago, very, very proactive in serving the industry because, of course, serving others is serving ourselves, right? We're all in this together, going back to that. So I do a lot of that kind of just side work on boards, and I'm very active in sort of innovating in the supply chain to try to accelerate preferred fibers and materials, which is where 70% of the impacts happen. And then at the eco-fashion level, which is my real job, my for-profit work, is about helping companies navigate the complexities of supply chains, right? Because it's super daunting. And I see these companies, retailers and brands making science-based climate targets, understanding the policy that's coming, wanting to diversify out of China because of all the brand and reputational risk and the geopolitical risk and the label risk. And, there's so many risks. I mean, getting your product stuck at customs because of the forced labor in Xinjiang. So like all these things. And then you see the demand of the consumer today picking up steam. And so many of these brands and retailers are literally like just don't know what to do because their businesses are so siloed. And so they have two different kinds of teams. They have their CSR, ESG, their teams that are really focused on sustainability and social justice issues and looking at, how can they keep the company moving forward in those areas of the business. And then you have your product teams, which are like rolling their sleeves up, no differently than they've ever been. The hardcore work around product, margin, price, volume, quality, all these things, testing, that is what's fundamental to the business. And it's very hard for those two different teams because they're so siloed to actually build holistic models. It's just not the way major brands and retailers are set up. So we at ECOfashion Corp come in and we help live at the intersection of those worlds and those business requirements to help give the product they want at the price they want, embedded with all that sustainability so that it's, again, goes back to getting added value. So what am I doing? I'm trying to help accelerate change on every level. It's like all hands on deck now, and collaboration, and I've had obviously worked with many, many major companies, is that key unlock. It really is.
Yeah. I want to dig a little bit deeper into your point around supply chain and the reality that some retail organizations, some supply chains, they weren't designed to, operate a certain way, or that sometimes the industry is so set on like a certain way of doing things that it's a matter of like kind of breaking through. And I think it's this whole idea of understanding those blockers, so to speak, from progress or from movement. And obviously, and I'm sure you've had so many C-suite conversations, at the brand level. I'm curious, are there any other things that are inhibiting or stalling progress, within retail organizations? Again, mainly at the C-suite level. Like, are there any, I guess, debates happening around like, oh, should we do this or should we not do this? Or how do we get started? Like, I'm curious to like understand really sitting in their seats, like what is, I guess, holding them back from taking action?
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, my friend Andrew Winston just came out with a great article. He's written a lot of books on the business case of sustainability and that, green and green are not mutually exclusive, right? Ecology and economy. So he talks about this as a sustainability recession a bit that's going to come hard and strong after this dip happens. But we are seeing a bit of a reset out there where, look, the world is a crazy place right now and companies have not met their economic targets because of simply just outside circumstances, right? Like the global, environment. So to some extent, there's a tension between that sort of hitting your numbers and then where do you see potentially the expendable part of the business? What are the nice to haves and the must haves? And there's been sort of a shift of priority on sustainability temporarily. But at the same time, all the commitments are in place and these companies have already said the train has already left the station. They're already moving down in that direction. So I think what you're going kind of see is a little bit of a reboot of the space. And then, over the next 12 to 18 months, it's going to come on really strong. It's not going to go away, right? Our industry, the fashion textile industry, if you include agriculture and transportation and, certain components that are absolutely part of the industry, 10% of the world's carbon footprint is coming out of fashion and textiles. And so when you listen to the C-suites and you listen to them having to make that business case and lead with, be careful in navigating profitability and sustainability from the lens of finance and survival, there's a little bit of that kind of, again, balancing act. But with the social media mafia out there today and holding companies to account, and then all the nonprofits and NGOs, not to mention obviously just this next generation kind of waking up to kind of what Native Americans once said: we don't inherit this land from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And I think these next generations are waking up to, climate change is real and our future is at stake. And they're pushing. And so it's this convergence of policy, consumer demand, and businesses knowing that to stay relevant and to actually be able to survive themselves, they're going to have to jump on this train if they're not already there. And they're going to have to actually keep things moving forward. So it's an exciting time. And again, it's a bit of a little bit bumpy just by virtue of the world we're living in. But this is the future of the industry.
Yeah. Well, in technology, it has been and continues to be such an incredible enabler of creating that transparency, not just at the organizational level, but for consumers too. I mean, we have been keeping an eye on some incredible startups and companies using blockchain to support that and also enable some pretty incredible brand experiences, at a marketing level, at a customer education and content level. I would love your thoughts on that, like kind of how the tech and startup worlds are, supporting this greater sustainability mission, whether it's through that traceability and education standpoint or resale/re-commerce. I mean, what do you find most exciting about this particular sector within the landscape?
Yeah. So technology has been an incredible catalyst in the space. I mean, I would say that the kind of key catalysts that everyone's talking about are circularity, regeneration, and technology, right? So whether you're talking about 3D, to reduce waste, like sampling, like Clo and all this sort of digital sampling style 3D. You're talking about even 3D printing like Variant, or your digital on-demand printing like Kronit. But in terms of traceability and data verification and blockchain, that is becoming like a must-have, not even a nice-to-have, because every major retailer and brand out there, they want to make sure that if they're going to talk about the work they're doing in any way, shape, or form, that they are able to validate the data. And so, we have a tech stack, a white label tech stack in ECOfashion Corp's manufacturing platform, which actually helps to support that journey for the consumer to scan the QR code, but also to upload and kind of splice and dice data to provide sustainability metrics to brands and retailers so that they can validate the work they're doing and show that this isn't just a nice feel good thing. This is actually really changing. It's a paradigm shift in our industry and sort of changing the way that we're sourcing and procuring fibers and materials, or the way that we're manufacturing or thinking about the end use or waste, or, and then AI is a massive force that is underway because, of course, the power of smart learning and machine learning and, is going to make us all better as we move into a smarter fashion world. And different kinds of technologies, even at the factory level, I've seen just mind-blowing things underway. And they're all really focused on, I've done, because I do a lot of public speaking, I've been asked to speak at technology conferences, which first I was a little confused about, why am I being asked to keynote here? But I'm realizing it's because so many of these technologies are focusing on reducing impact, like waste, water, energy use, chemical use, reducing carbon and climate, impact, social justice, business. And so our industry is a nearly $3 trillion global industry if you include all the categories. And the power of this industry and the impacts of the industry are just the sheer magnitude and multitude of impact. We need solutions that are driven by new technologies. And so it's really exciting to see, new business models, new technologies, circularity kind of coming to the forefront, and renewable energies. And, so yeah, I think we're just scratching the surface. We haven't even started really.
Yeah. It'll be so incredible to see how that entire landscape takes shape and, what new companies we see emerging. I think we're really scratching the surface on the opportunity, in my opinion. So I can't wait to see what's next. But to close out our time together, Marci, we talked a lot about the incredible work you're doing, have done. I think we only scratched the surface, honestly, of your incredible career and dedication to this space. But I do want to close out, I guess, with more practical, even actionable type takeaways. A lot of our listeners are in specialty/fashion, and, they're likely at different stages of their sustainability journeys. Do you have any closing takeaways, recommendations for them, even calls to action for them? Again, knowing that everyone's kind of in this journey at different stages or taking different approaches?
Yeah, I think, I've mentioned collaboration. I think, you have to be willing to kind of lean into, there's incredible communities out there right now, whether even just talking about the textile exchange, great resources and toolkits and guidance. There's a lot of organizations out there. Fashion Makes Change. I had a call with them this morning, and where you can go and you can learn from others. And there's just such great work out there now more than ever before. From the standpoint of, obviously, on a consumer level, my book, Eco Renaissance, is available, anywhere, Amazon and so on. But EcoFashion really, is here to serve. And if it's something that we don't do, we can refer people to other places where they can get that support and handholding. The one thing I would say is this kind of change has to be done right, because if it's not looked at seriously, and missteps can cost everybody. And we've seen that through the years where somebody maybe cheats or thinks that they can just take a kind of backdoor into something, and at the end of the day we all compromised if fraud becomes something that gets put out in media. And there's real work to do. We have a third of the world's textiles are made out of cotton, and the soil health of our planet is like the skin of our body. It's the skin of the earth, right? It protects us. It's meant to absorb carbon and sequester carbon, but it's when it's, broken down and destroyed with all the toxic chemicals that are put into our, not only the farming, but the production of cotton textiles, which crosses all categories in our industry. Ultimately, it's not even about depleting and destroying. It's about, it's no longer serving, right? It's not sequestering carbon anymore. And that's super important, right? Because agriculture can actually almost single-handedly solve for climate change if we can bring it back to where we rebuild the ecosystems and biodiversity that are meant to serve us and have that symbiotic relationship. So I would just say, brands and retailers should look at the companies they're working with, reach out, get support, join organizations, learn from other companies that are doing the work. There's a kind of a new mindset around cooperation. When I entered the industry, it was all about like, watch your back. It's so competitive, right? And I had come out of the natural and organic food industry where it was all about, we're in this together, right? So it was kind of this like mind game. And now I realize, finally, the textile, fashion, retail, everyone is at the table, everyone who's a part of the supply chain, to figure out how can we, hold hands to build win-win models that are transformative and serve us for the future.
What a way to close out, Marci. Thank you again so much for taking the time out, for sharing your story, for sharing everything that you're working on, and even sharing some really, I think, thought-provoking and valuable insights along the way. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. And hopefully you'll share my link. So if anyone does need support, that's why I'm here.
Absolutely. And to that end, we'll definitely be sharing the good word, not just in the show notes, but on social media. We'll be sure to tag you, Marci, too. So if anyone has any direct questions for you, comments, experiences, even that they want to share, we want to make sure we keep those conversations going. I think that's what it's all about. You mentioned everyone kind of having a seat at the table. We think that's incredibly important if we want to drive positive change in the retail industry. So we'll be sure to do that. And of course, to all of you listening, be sure to go to your preferred podcast platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. Leave us a rating or review or any feedback you may have on this episode or the show in general. We do keep track of those. We do try to follow up with you all. So we'd love your thoughts on this conversation and however else you want us to tackle this very big and very important issue within the retail world. We only believe it'll become more central to conversations and operations moving forward. So we're excited to dig deeper moving forward. But for now, that's it from us, everyone. Thank you again so much for joining us. We will see you next time. Take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of Retail Remix. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on your favorite podcast player. Until next time, keep mixing it up.